This is another installment of the PRSA College of Fellows Voices for the Future project. I'm Greg Bailey, APR, fellow PRSA. Joining me today is Mickey Nall, APR, fellow PRSA, from the city of Gainesville, Florida. Welcome, Mickey.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it very much. Great to be here.
Sure. Mickey's the senior lecturer and professional in residence for the Department of Public Relations at the University of Florida. Prior to joining his alma mater, he spent more than 30 years as an agency professional in public relations. So, Mickey, let's just start with what led you down the path to a public relations career?
Oh, wow. Going back into ancient times, I always wanted to be a writer. Okay. And I didn't know what kind of writer, but I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed, journaling. I enjoyed making up stories. I enjoyed, pretty much every aspect. And I come from a long line of jokingly storytellers, not necessarily truth tellers, but storytellers. and so I grew up, with that sort of ethos, and I enjoy storytelling, and so I wanted to be a writer. Now I didn't know if that was going to take the form of journalism or not. So by the time I got to college, they began by your sophomore year, you're sort of being forced into a major, and so for me it was journalism and communications. But I really thought I would probably be a journalist, and was fortunate to have an internship at the Pensacola News Journal, which was my hometown daily newspaper, a big Gannett paper, about 80,000 daily circulation in that era. And I began my internship. Well, within a few weeks of it, and when you're the intern, you get the city beat. You're always on the city desk, and you get the crummy stories. And I lucked out. I got a couple of big stories because calls came in and they needed a reporter, and so I was the only one there, and got sent out to do it. And so I made over a very short period of time, quite a few bylined articles. And the other journalists, the reporters were giving me a hard time, staff writers, that, wow, you have such a future in this industry. And in my head, though, Greg, I was constantly thinking, I don't know that I want to do this. This is not that interesting to me. The inverted pyramid, who, what, when, where, why, and how of it, because it's city beat reporting. I went to school board meetings, I went to, county commission meetings, city council meetings, and it was just very rote. I felt like I was taking minutes a lot and trying to find that one piece to write an article on. And so I immediately, of course, like any uninformed and dumb intern, went to the editor and said, I'd like to do some feature stories. I think that's really more my speed. And he was like, yeah, well, maybe in a year or two or three, you could, the feature writers over there in the feature section, those men and women are seasoned, reporters. And so I began writing some on my own time, just began writing my own features, and putting them sort of under the editor's door and be like, what do you think? What do you think? So finally he was like, all right, we'll let you do one. And I did it, and I did like it better because it's more long form, and enjoyed it, but it just really wasn't doing it for me. So I was finishing up, graduating my undergrad, and I went, you know what, I don't know about this. So I had a lovely professor who said, really, with your love of writing, you may want to consider public relations. And I was, I didn't know a lot about that. And in my head, it was like, oh, that sounds like retail. I don't want to do retail. And, or it sounds like sales. I don't want to do sales. And so I immediately, in that era, applied to grad school, and got in at the University of Florida, and came on down to Gainesville and did my graduate work. And so with more of a basis in public relations and mass comm theory, and that type of coursework, and it really did seem like a better fit. Graduated, went back to my hometown, and couldn't find a job. Of course, it was like 1982, horrible economy. People complain now about interest rates. The average home loan interest rate was 12% then. And it was just like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And believe it or not, my father, through his local bar. He knew a guy that sat on another bar stool that happened to be the general manager of our ABC affiliate, a guy named Jimmy Grimes. And Jimmy, my dad convinced Jimmy to interview me, like just an info interview, you know. So I go and interview with Jimmy, and he's like, you know, we have this man, you've got the look. At that era, I had the look, you know, television look. And he's like, what, you know, I have a weather slot open right now for like 6:30 a.m. to, you know, you know how they do the cut-ins from various to do weather. And I'm like, in my head, I'm going, I'm not a meteorologist. I've had no broadcast experience. How in the hell could I do this? And I told him, I don't know about that. And he goes, but I think you'd be great at sales. You're very articulate. I think you know, in my head, I'm going, oh, I just don't think I'm going to be good at that. And he said, but you know what? I'm on the board of directors here in town for the United Way of Escambia County, Florida. And they have a director of public relations position open. Would you be interested? And in my head, I'm still going, well, how can I be a director? I'm you know, I'm just a kid. And he was like, I'll get you an interview over there. So long story longer, I had an interview the next Monday, whatever it was, and I got hired as director. And it was a director, you know, a department of one, me, the director.
Right.
You know, so a typewriter, a glue stick, and a Xerox machine, and I was ready to conquer the world. And that's how it started.
Was there an experience then, or an aha moment for you that says, "Oh, I'm in the right place. I can get this. I get this, and I can do this work."
It really was. And like so many PR people of that era, I don't know that it has quite the cachet that it does, you know, now that it did then. My first couple of stories that I got placed at the newspaper and at the ABC affiliate, which was our only television station in town then, that's when I knew it was right. And I'm going to use this phraseology. I don't believe this. It wasn't this way, but it was a little bit of ego puppet master. You know what I mean? It's like I wrote stuff, I pitched stuff, I set up who would be interviewed. I set up the 3 sources for the interviews, all of it myself from our volunteer base of, you know, United Way volunteers. And the reporter said, that's great. When do you want to start? And, you know, often we often did. I did all their work is what I did. But that served me through my entire career to this day. That serves me really well, rather than just pitching a little story or pitching one little thing. I like pitch a bigger macro kind of concept and then fill in all the blanks. And in my agency years, I just made sure one of those fill-ins was one of my clients and their brand. And reporters love that. And as time went by, I became that trusted resource. And I liked that a lot. I liked that journalists would call me, and it wouldn't be about my place of work, or it wouldn't be about my client when on the agency side. It was just for my resource. Did I have a resource for X? Or what did I think? I mean, I a couple of times became a little part of the story. And you know, as an expert in earned media or something, and so that was very gratifying. And I know that sounds ego, but it was very gratifying. I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt very young and unprepared in many respects, and I'm like, wow, this really worked. And at the 5-year point, Greg, I took my APR also, and because again, I was still searching in my head for validation, and I just wanted to be sure I knew what I knew. I thought I did, but I just wanted to be sure, and I was and am very successful. But I sort of attribute a great education at Florida and at the University of Florida, and a great resource in the Florida Public Relations Association and the Public Relations Society of America, because where I worked, I worked, in a small city, and
Right.
Both of those things really, all of that sort of worked together, and I knew I was in the right place. I think sometimes to do great work, you have to feel comfortable and at home, if you will, in the work, and then you do even greater work when you're challenged more and you fail a few times. I've always said it. I learned more from all of my failures than I ever did from my successes or awards. I learned from the failures, and I was a better practitioner.
That's great advice. Yeah. So you then went on and you spent many, many years at Ogilvy, and you were in Atlanta and New York and DC. Do you have a favorite project from those years that sort of talks a little bit about what you've just talked about in terms of being a valued resource?
Sure. Yeah, I was with Ogilvy Public Relations, which was part of the Ogilvy and Mather Group, one of the world's largest agencies. I was with them 22 years and had the privilege of working in Washington, D.C., and was seconded to the White House during the second Bush administration. So I worked out of the New York office of Ogilvy as a White House liaison, and then was eventually promoted to managing director of Atlanta and the Southeast for the brand and our clients. And what so much of the work that I did was around big brands, Coca-Cola, UPS, Intercontinental Hotel Group. Great work, Yum Brands, consumer work. But the most gratifying work I did, and this is when I started at Ogilvy, and all the way through my full time there over all those years, was work I did in what we would call now public interest communications. But back then we didn't call it that. It was called, more like public health education, public safety education in that era. It wasn't, and then it became, people called it social marketing for a long time. But with the rise of social media, we had to abandon that terminology and it became public interest communication. So the work I did for the United States Fire Administration, which is part of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency in Washington, D.C., I was an account director and eventually went to vice president and senior vice president there. FEMA was one of my cornerstone accounts, and I had a large account team. I loved the work with the fire administration because it was the first time I had been exposed to work that public relations can indeed save lives. And I put together, and my team put together, something called it was a media monitoring product, but it was basically, we monitored through a contractor, every fire death in the U.S., residential fire death. So when someone died in the U.S. in a fire, we knew about it in my office, and we knew about it usually the day after. And so what we did was we put together fire fact sheets on types of fires, like a candle fire, a space heater fire, a Christmas tree fire, a non-working smoke detector fire, all of these types of fires, because there's many kinds. And we put some fact sheets together around that. And this was back in the day, so don't laugh. But we would fax into all of the media outlets in that market. We would fax into every one of them a statement from the United States Fire Administrator that we had written and put together, and her availability to talk to anyone about fire safety in the home, residential fire safety, and then some factoids about it. I want you to know, we never had an editor or a producer not use it, because it's so tragic when someone dies in a fire, because for the most part, fire deaths are preventable. The only time probably they're not sometimes is if there's a natural gas explosion. There might, that's usually human error too. But if you don't burn candles, you probably won't catch the blanket on fire. If you don't smoke in bed, you won't catch the mattress on fire. If you unplug your Christmas tree every night and not put any flame near it, you won't, those types, it's just very preventable. And then from there, I was part of the team. I was the lead of the team that received a congressional, U.S. Congress congressional mention in the Congressional Quarterly that this monitoring system we had put in place was indeed saving lives, because the fire administration tracks the number of residential deaths per year, and the deaths were coming down. And the only thing that was different was they had a contractor, us, Ogilvy, reaching out and solving the problem, if you would, for that market. But maybe you didn't realize some clothing is highly flammable. You need to look at the label. Maybe you didn't realize that an old mattress might not meet the standards. Now, new mattresses have they don't catch on fire. Those types of things, and that things you could do in your home, and that maybe you didn't know, but your local fire department or your volunteer firefighters in your community will give you a smoke detector. Sometimes we'll come install it, and we'll even come by twice a year and change the batteries for you, because the biggest preventer of fire death is warning. You get warned, you get out of your house or out of your apartment, and you don't die. And so it was like, wow, smoke detectors work, but they don't work if you don't change the batteries. They don't work if you undo the battery because the oven makes it come on in your kitchen, and so it was this constant, you can never stop. It's just like seatbelts. It's just like forest fires. It's just like so many of these public education, public safety campaigns. When you stop doing them, people begin behaving badly again. And so great public interest communications has to generate awareness, sure. But the most successful public relations programming in any era is activity-based. What is the action we want you to take? And then we measure the outcomes. And so the work we did for FEMA and the fire administration was about action. You had to have a smoke detector. You had to change the batteries. It's all free. The systems are set up in our communities to have that done free. So it was huge. For me, it was, oh my gosh, PR can save lives. And I just had never thought of PR that way. I thought it as a very consumer type work. So for me, very gratifying. And I went on to do a lot of work for the CDC and for other federal agencies while in Washington. The work I did when I was at the White House was for the Office of National Drug Control Policy. It was the anti-drug campaign. And so, it was targeted to middle schoolers and their parents, because no matter how you feel about recreational drugs, nobody thinks a child should be consuming any drug other than supervised by their parent and doctor. And so I was very much a part of that. And so, I certainly understood the theory and processes behind moving a population or an audience or a stakeholder group from we know nothing to awareness to some output to finally to outcome. And it's that outcome activity-based PR that really sort of charges me up, and I got to see results. And so it was very gratifying.
That's terrific. So not aside from your outstanding career, Mickey's also a champion for PRSA. He served roles at every level of the society and national chair in 2013. And in 2022, you received the Gold Anvil Award, the highest individual award recognizing a lifetime of achievement in public relations. So Mickey, talk about how PRSA has enriched your career.
Oh my gosh. When you talk about family outside of your own family, so when you talk about blood relatives versus what I call the PRSA DNA relative. Okay, I mean the public relations is in my DNA, and PRSA is where that DNA is founded and centered. And so, for me, initially it was about networking and continuing education. I first joined the National Capital Chapter, was where my first PRSA chapter that I joined. And it was so wonderful. First of all, it's a huge chapter, and it's government and public affairs and agencies and trade associations. And it's just, and big consumer groups because of their headquarters maybe based in Maryland or Virginia and in the district. And so it was, wow, look how many people I know. And I came from a small market that there weren't, if there were 40 PR jobs, there were 40 PR jobs. And you get to DC and there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of public relations jobs, professional public relations jobs. And PRSA for me was the big connector. And so that was the start. It was the connection. I loved that connection. And I loved the chapter meetings and the chapter continuing ed. And, little time goes by and you get involved in committees and you start doing other work. And we had an awards program, just like every PRSA chapter. And we supported several PRSSA chapters. And so I got involved with the awards program and the event and loved all that and looked at it as, again, a big fun evening, and one started winning awards. And and again, the awards for me are like APR. It's validation. It's like, okay, I know how to write a 2-page summary, and I know how to demonstrate research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. But you learn how to do that. And so I love that. And then went on to win some silver anvils too, and some bronze anvils. And it I think the awards program at PRSA really does support the professional, because you're demonstrating you've learned something and you've done it well, and that it wasn't luck. It wasn't luck. It was, there was a science behind some of the art we do, and I really attribute much of my success to those components within PRSA. And then as time went by, I was moved to Atlanta in 2005, and so I transferred to the Great Georgia chapter, which is another humongous chapter, just like National Capital. And it was the immediate way of connecting with that community. I didn't know anyone there, and while I was taking over the managing director role in our Atlanta office and Atlanta operations at Ogilvy, I didn't know people there. And so PRSA was the immediate connector. And Denise Grant was the chapter administrator then of the Georgia chapter. And she just took me under her arm and introduced me to every major agency owner or general manager or managing director. I went and visited in the first 30 days, every single one of them. And then she introduced me to it's called the Order of the Phoenix, which is a Hall of Fame, the Georgia chapter. It predates the College of Fellows. It's been around longer than the College of Fellows. And she introduced me to every living Order of the Phoenix recipient. And I went on my own and asked them questions. And it was just lovely. And so suddenly I could go into our chapter luncheons, chapter awards programs, anything we did, and I knew 50 people just like that. And PRSA to me it's first and foremost about connections, and connections to a community, connections to the community of PR, but also the community in which you live and work. And it was just so helpful. And that I got clients through the organization. So when some people, they're like, well, I give a lot of money to PRSA, or I do a lot. Everything I've ever done has paid me back tenfold, believe me. And I loved that. And so as time went by, though, I also utilized PRSA to help me help my employees. And what I mean by that is PRSA has probably the most phenomenal public relations webinar series in the world. Okay. And it varies year to year, but somewhere between 75 and 100 webinars. And that's part of your membership fee. I use that for my employees for their ongoing training. So I'd be like, there's a webinar coming up on X. It's in your KPI. It's in your KPI as an employee. You have to attend that webinar because you need to know a little bit about evaluation, or you need to, when social media was starting out, you need to understand this better. You need to know about content creation. More importantly, as time went by, you need to know how to do social media analysis. And right now, if I was running a big agency, a small agency, I'd be making my employees attend the webinars on AI. And it's just, it opens your mind up, because we had great training. Ogilvy, it's one of the greatest training programs in the world. And we send our employees to Ogilvy branded training. And we have a very Ogilvy way of doing things, and excellent. But you also need that external, outside the box thinking. And so that's what I loved about the webinar series, and still love it. And so for me, PRSA was an educator, a connector, a network. When I do remember with certain clients, every now and then we would have an issue, maybe an operational issue at a location in some state. And I always go to PRSA and look at the agency owners that are local. And I would pick up the phone and call someone and say, here's what the issue. Do you want to sub to Ogilvy? Because we don't have people on the ground there to deal with this. And, 9 out of 10, sure,
Yeah,
and
right.
I would remind them that I got to them through the PRSA directory. I didn't necessarily know about their work. And I saw it as then a major resource for me to be able to conduct the business that I needed to conduct on behalf of my clients. And it was really, really helpful. And then later, even we might have some national for some of our public interest clients, maybe national campaigns partnering with the American Heart Association or the American Cancer Society. And again, I could reach out through PRSA and say, hey, I'm a member. Here's what we've got. We would love for you to host this. And would you consider it? Let me send you, the information. And invariably, it was a quicker connection. And you're in the agency business, it's all about the timing and the speed oftentimes. And PRSA helped give me oftentimes the traction I needed to make something happen. And so, connector, educator, awards, icon for me, the international conference that's done by PRSA each year. I was looking back through some records recently for something else. And I went to my first icon in 1989 in Cincinnati, and it just blew my mind. And it was so phenomenal. And since I have not missed an icon since 2006, I believe. So I have been, almost 20 years straight. Now, prior to that, I, go 1 year. If it was too far away, I couldn't go the next year or something. But since 2006, it's embedded in my calendar for a lot of reasons. For one is throughout my career, like others who are part of the College of Fellows, PRSA has provided different things at different moments in my life. So to be a senior practitioner, the College of Fellows means so much to me, and those relationships and the programming at Icon that's done for that senior practitioner. It's not like we have the answer to everything, and it's not like we can't learn a new strategy. We're all good as fellows of connecting the dots. See, I can read another program and I can connect the dots to maybe something I'm doing. I can take from it something useful for our client or a piece of work I'm doing. But it's nothing like being in the room with them and going session to session with them that I don't pick up so much more even. And so so in this, I'm going to call it the 15 years, the fellows means more to me than anything. And of course, it's part of PRSA, but that's the big hook and draw for me now is fellows. And I joke with fellows that we probably could have our own College of Fellows conference and do really, really well and enjoy that moment. I joke with everyone, you've heard it before from me too, that the cocktail party before the induction ceremony every year is my personal favorite part of conference. Because it's my personal favorite part because I get to see everybody and, and there's hundreds of people there. And you go to Icon, and Icon's phenomenal, but there are thousands of people there. You can't get to everyone. You don't get to see everyone. But I get to see my cohort. I get to see my group, and my immediate PRSA family, and I enjoy that so much. And somebody will share something of their life with me, or something of some new work they're doing, and we post conference. We're on the phone together. We're talking to one another. We're helping each other out, and I love that because, you don't need to be extroverted to be in public relations. In fact, some of the best PR gurus are introverted. But you need to have a little spark in your eye. You need to be open, just open to new experiences and new work and new approaches. And the fellows does that for me. And so I value my PRSA membership very much. It's an easy thing to do for me to support it. you know, and
Thanks,
I give
Mickey.
back in a lot of ways, but
Right,
I
right.
PRSA.
Well, we are out of time, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Take care.